Thank you very much, Stephen. My name is Alfred, and I will be dealing with building relationships that work. The overall section has three components, looking at the trends of the first 5 years or the last 5 years. What is the perspective that needs to change related to our systems today, and what does that new perspective look like? The trends that are important are: one is connectivity. Connectivity is ubiquitous because of wireless communication, satellite, and high quality data operations. Cloud computing has allowed us to have a high level of reuse, a focus of expertise and hardware for reuse, so that big data applications can be built, and the businesses can reuse the infrastructure at a lot less expense with a lot more functionality. People have shown that social media is extremely important to their ability to have relationships and develop new relationships. This is a trend that many of us didn't expect, but is very relevant to the needs of the future infrastructure. But there are lots of problems. There's security. It exists, but it's not very. There's problems. It's always got ongoing issues. Privacy doesn't really exist. Accountability doesn't exist, and control is very limited. Vince Cerf, the developer of TCP/IP, outlines that the Internet's original architecture had two flaws: too little addressing space and no security. Addressing has been dealt with, but security remains an ongoing problem. Let's look at the way we build our environments today. So in our environments today, we have, in this example, two larger corporations. Each of them implement firewalls to protect themselves from the outside world. They implement many different security operations regarding that. There's constant monitoring in the firewall. There's load balancing. There's traffic management. There's access control systems. So there's many applications that go into dealing with security. In each of these environments, you have multiple networks, databases, applications, and users. What's most important to a business is that their information and operations are protected from the outside world. But when we want to talk to somebody else or create a relationship, we have to use some kind of technology. So we develop VPNs and other related technologies, such as a gateway, to implement IoT devices. VPNs for data, direct data, and gateways for IoT. So, relationships are obviously important, and when you look at this, what do they have in common? They're all relationships. They're not just connections, they are relationships, because relationships are complicated. It is not a straightforward thing to say, I have these relationships and they're simple. It's not so easy, but you got to be able to have an environment where relationships occur and they are not simple. Because relationships are core to society. Sharing is core to relationships. So fundamentally, relationships and sharing of information, devices, and operations must be core to a new protocol so that technical and business solutions work together. So let's look at what a shared environment might look like, a relationship managed environment. So in this protected functional network, we have three companies. Each of those companies have various devices. This one has two, this one has three, and this one three. These connections between the devices mean that each of the devices understand who its peer is and how to communicate to its peer. They also communicate to various servers. These servers and these devices all work together. And what we mean by that is they're always in communication. And if anything goes wrong in the environment, they report the problem, and everybody knows about the problem. Let me give you an example. So if this device here is contacted by a third party from outside with the incorrect credentials, this device will automatically tell all of the devices and the servers that this connection, this IP, didn't have the credentials to talk to me, and that we need to block them from the environment. So everybody rejects any connection associated with that individual. That is no trust security. In a no trust security environment, nobody trusts anybody at any time. This is very similar to us when we're walking down the street of a big city that we're strangers in, and that we are very nervous about our environment, and we don't trust anybody at any time. That is very common in our society. It's very common, and it's the same principle that we employ in these types of environments. So you have a health ecosystem and a support ecosystem that work together in an environment that protects itself and manages itself. So when two businesses want to create a relationship, because this is a relationship-driven environment, you go and say, I want to work with you, company 1 and 2. We want to work together because I have these devices in your city that need to get supported, and I know you have the expertise to do it. And company 1 says, yeah, I would like to actually get access to some of your data regarding this particular process. Would that be okay? And they say, yeah, let's do this. Let's define how our relationship's going to work and what the terms of the terms of the relationship are. Those terms get translated into policies and permissions that drive the devices and access to those devices. So now, using relationship management, I define what users, what devices, and what information each of us have access to for what reason. So this is actually, this principle that I've just shown you is based on Beacon, which is a product that we developed called a functional network. And in this functional network, you have relationship management as the main driver. In relationship management, it controls all aspects of the system: security, device peers, health ecosystem, and support ecosystem. So what devices can talk to what devices? Relationship management. Security. What devices are part of the environment? How they're registered into the environment. The health ecosystem does a monitoring analysis based on all of the parameters that are in the system, and the support ecosystem resolves issues associated with the system. Anybody from outside that wants to talk to the system talks through the API. The API provides the interface for the outside world so that security is maintained. Any attempt at direct contact is rejected. So as businesses are added to the system, devices get added to the business, and the business controls each device that's added into the system. The 4 principles that this system is built on: security, privacy, control, and accountability. Very important components in the system. So relationships define operations in the new secure relationship protocol. That includes the technical nodes, devices, connections, information, ownership, and messaging. Relationships exist between owners, users, devices, and information. Ownership is central to the system operation. Businesses own the devices and users. Businesses define the rights to access operations and management of devices by users and in relation to other businesses. Individuals are entities who have information and resources. So they're very similar rights to a corporation, but they're handled a little bit differently because they don't have the same needs. So an SRP is a self-securing and self-managing infrastructure. So it's an infrastructure that's shared by everyone. The SRP framework looks like this. You have your core components: relationship management, security, health ecosystem, and support ecosystem. As soon as you implement the SRP protocol, then you add your devices and you define the relationships of those devices. Which devices see which other devices, who has access to what devices, and that requires users. So you add the users into the system and maybe some other devices, and the relationship management process deals with them all. This is your environment now. You control the environment, but you don't have to worry about all the technical infrastructure of this environment any longer. The health and support ecosystem provide you a quality of service that is critical for monitoring and knowing whether your environment is working properly. So in your environment, you now add new business functions. But you don't have to build them the same way anymore. You build them in, you can assume that the security is there. You can assume that the interactions with devices and the ability to create relationships is there. So you build your system functions. Those system functions are yours, and in that set of functions that you're developing, you can keep them private, or you can have a shared service so that others can utilize those. Or you can define which businesses are going to share those functions with you specifically, so that you can interact more effectively with with your supply chain, for example. So as more and more SRPs are implemented, the relationship management system manages operations within and between networks. So as the SRPs grow in availability, those organizations that you want to do business with and the different types of services that are available start becoming available at larger and larger numbers because of the shared infrastructure. An important consideration is bad behavior. And what is bad behavior? What is good behavior? That's been a security problem in the past, but it's actually more of an operational problem. So from an operational perspective, you need to be able to define what is good behavior and what bad behavior on different elements, and then manage those components, because these are operational concerns, not security concerns. What we're going to do next is consider what the vision for growth is and the path to get there. So it's going to go from simple edge computing like we have with Beacon today to a full virtualized environment in the future, because that's ultimately where we're going to end up. And there will be increased continuity of services as we're going down this path, and increasing peer interactions as we're going down this path. So the first process after Beacon is to have everything move to the network, and then have the networks, the various SRPs start to work together. And so you start to create external relationships with your organization. Then you start to chain your transactions. You chain more of your transactions because you have increased functionality, and you're able to perform more operations in relation to a supply chain, for example. The next is you start to interact in your supply chain with more integrated transactions, so that more transactions are integrated into the supply chain. Your supply chain may get more complex, may get larger, but because you can create relationships easily, the ability to interact on a much more integrated level increases. The ultimate goal is to have goal setting. So you can say, I want to do this. I want to go to Geneva. And when you say I want to go to Geneva, you simply define the dates and some other parameters, and the system will give you options. And so then you just simply choose your option, and the transactions are dealt with, so that it saves time, it saves money, but it's an integrated environment that's all managed, so that anything that goes wrong, if a transaction it goes wrong, it's got to get adjudicated through the accountability process, and that's where accountability becomes very important. So, speaking of that, you have to have security for privacy. Privacy requires control. Control requires accountability. And accountability requires security. Accountability is critical to the environment, and accountability needs to be definable and managed, so that there's consequences to bad behavior. What we will see is, as complexity increases, we also will see the level of accountability increase as the environment grows. I want to say thank you very much for your attention, and we will be moving on to Section 3 with Irfan Alambaghi.